The war had lasted 10 years. 10 long years of fire, death, and broken worlds. Humanity had fought hard, but they were tired. The Kelthan Empire was also tired. Both sides had lost too much. So they agreed to meet and talk about peace. Taeho stood in the cold metal room of the space station. He was 27 years old, a soldier who had seen too many battles. His hands were rough from holding weapons. His eyes were calm but heavy with memories. He wore a simple black uniform, and his short dark hair was neatly combed. He looked like an ordinary man. That was what everyone thought. The door opened, and Admiral Park walked in. He was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been like a father to Taeho for many years. Today, he looked sad. "They have agreed to the peace treaty," Admiral Park said. His voice was low. "But they want something from us." Taeho already knew. He had heard the rumors. "They want a human," he said. "A husband for their queen." Admiral Park nodded slowly. "Queen Vera of the Kelthan Empire. She is young but powerful. Her people believe that taking a human husband will show their victory over us. It is a symbol, a trophy." Taeho said nothing. He just looked at the stars through the small window. "You do not have to do this," Admiral Park said quickly. "We can find someone else. A politician. A nobleman. Anyone." "No," Taeho said quietly. "I will go." Admiral Park stared at him. "Why? You have given enough. You have fought in every major battle. You have saved thousands of lives. Why would you throw yourself into this?" Taeho turned to look at the old man. "Because I am tired of war. If my life can bring peace, then it is a good trade." 3 days later, Taeho boarded a Kelthan ship. It was massive, dark, and cold. The walls were made of black metal, and the lights were dim purple. Everything felt strange and unwelcoming. Kelthan soldiers stood in lines, watching him with their pale blue eyes. They were tall, almost 7 feet, with silver skin and sharp features. They looked at Taeho like he was a small animal, weak, unimportant. Taeho kept his face calm. He walked with steady steps, showing no fear. Inside, his heart was beating fast, but he did not let it show. He had learned long ago that showing weakness was dangerous. The ship traveled for 5 days through dark space. Taeho was kept in a small room with only a bed and a window. No one spoke to him. No one brought him food except for a silent servant who left trays at his door. He ate alone, slept alone, and waited. On the 6th day, they arrived at the Kelthan homeworld. It was a large planet covered in gray clouds and tall black towers. Everything looked sharp and cold. There was no green, no blue, no warmth. Taeho thought it looked like a world that had forgotten how to smile. He was taken to the royal palace. It was the largest building he had ever seen. The walls were made of dark stone, and the ceilings were so high that he could not see the top. Thousands of Kelthan nobles filled the great hall, all dressed in silver and black. They whispered and laughed as Taeho walked past them. "Look at him," one noble said loudly. "So small. So fragile." "Humans are weak creatures," another said. "They break easily." Taeho heard every word, but he did not react. He kept walking until he reached the end of the hall. There, on a massive throne made of black crystal, sat Queen Vera. She was beautiful in a cold way. Her skin was pale silver, and her hair was long and white like snow. Her eyes were deep purple, sharp, and intelligent. She wore a black gown covered in tiny lights that looked like stars. A thin crown sat on her head, simple but elegant. She looked at Taeho with no expression on her face. "So this is the human?" she said. Her voice was smooth and clear. "This is what they sent to be my husband." Taeho bowed his head slightly. "I am Taeho. I come in the name of peace." The hall fell silent. The nobles watched with curious eyes. Queen Vera leaned forward on her throne and studied him like he was a strange insect. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. "Your kind fought us for 10 years. I thought you would be more impressive." Taiho met her eyes. "Size is not everything, Your Majesty." A few nobles laughed at his words. Queen Vera did not laugh. She tilted her head, her purple eyes never leaving his face. "Brave words for a weak species," she said. "But words mean nothing here. Only strength matters in my empire." Taiho said nothing. He just stood there, calm and steady. The wedding ceremony happened that same night. It was quick and cold, with no warmth or celebration. Taiho stood beside the queen as a priest spoke words he did not understand. He placed his hand on a glowing stone, and the ceremony was complete. He was now the husband of Queen Vera, though he was nothing more than a symbol of human defeat. After the ceremony, Vera spoke to him for the last time that night. "You will have your own quarters," she said. "You will not bother me. You will not speak unless spoken to. You are here because the treaty demanded it, nothing more." Taiho nodded. "I understand." Vera watched him for a long moment. There was something in her eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or confusion. She had expected him to be angry, to beg, to cry. But he just stood there, calm as still water. "You are strange for a human," she said quietly. Taiho almost smiled. "Perhaps." That night, Taiho sat alone in his cold room. The bed was hard, and the air was thin. He looked out the window at the gray sky and thought about Earth. He thought about his mother, his friends, and the life he had left behind. He did not know if he would ever see them again, but he also thought about the future. The war was over. Millions of lives would be saved. Children would grow up without knowing the sound of bombs. Families would not lose their loved ones to battle. For that, Taiho could endure anything. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Stay strong. Stay patient. The storm will pass." Outside his window, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, Earth was still spinning. And Taiho made a silent promise to survive. No matter what this strange empire threw at him, he was just one man. But sometimes, one man was enough. Weeks passed in the Kelthon Palace. Taiho lived in his small quarters, far from the queen and far from the grand halls of power. The servants brought him food twice a day. The guards watched his door at all hours. No one spoke to him. No one cared about him. He was invisible. But Taiho did not waste his time feeling sorry for himself. Every morning, before the sun rose over the gray clouds, he woke up and trained. His room was small, but he made it work. He did push-ups until his arms burned. He did sit-ups until his stomach ached. He practiced punches and kicks against the cold metal walls until his knuckles turned red. The servants watched him through the door with confused eyes. Why was this weak human working so hard? What was the point? They laughed and called him foolish behind his back. Taiho did not care. He kept training. In the afternoons, he studied. He found old books in the corner of his room. Kelthon texts about history, language, and culture. He did not understand the words at first, but he worked hard every day. He wrote letters on paper again and again until he remembered them. He spoke out loud, practicing the strange sounds of the Kelthon language. Within 2 months, he could read basic sentences. Within 4 months, he could understand most conversations. The servants did not know this. They still spoke freely around him, thinking he was too stupid to understand. "The queen's new pet is boring," one servant said to another outside his door. "He just sits there, reading and exercising. What a waste of space." "At least he is quiet," the other replied. Better than a noisy human crying all day. Taiho heard everything. He said nothing. Queen Vera rarely thought about her human husband. She had more important things to do. The empire was vast, and there were many problems to solve. There were trade agreements to sign, military reports to read, and noble families to keep happy. The human was just a symbol, a reminder of their victory over the weak species called humanity. But sometimes, late at night, she found herself thinking about him. She had expected him to cause trouble. She had expected anger, tears, or demands. But he was silent. He never complained. He never asked for anything. He just existed like a ghost in the corner of her palace. One night, Vera could not sleep. She walked through the empty halls of the palace, her long white hair flowing behind her. The guards bowed as she passed, but she ignored them. Her mind was restless. Without thinking, she found herself near Taiho's quarters. The door was slightly open, and she could see light inside. Curious, she stopped and looked through the gap. Taiho was sitting at a small table, reading a book by candlelight. His face was calm and focused. His lips moved slightly as he whispered words to himself. Kelthon words. Vera's eyes widened. He was learning their language? She watched him for a long moment. His discipline surprised her. Her own nobles spent their nights drinking wine and playing games. This human spent his nights studying like a scholar. Strange, she thought. Very strange. She left without making a sound. Days later, Vera decided to test him. She called for Taiho to join her in the throne room. The nobles watched with amused eyes as the human walked in. He looked the same as always, calm face, steady steps, simple clothing. Human, Vera said, speaking in perfect Kelthon. How are you finding life in my palace? The nobles expected him to stay silent or speak in broken words. But Taiho looked at the queen and replied in clear Kelthon. It is quiet, he said, but I have learned to enjoy silence. The room went still. The nobles stared at him in shock. He spoke their language? How was that possible? Vera hid her surprise behind a cold expression. You have been busy, I see. Taiho bowed his head. I believe in using time wisely, Your Majesty. A noble named Kiran stepped forward. He was tall and proud, with a cruel smile on his thin lips. He was one of the most powerful lords in the empire and hated humans more than anyone. So the pet has learned a few tricks, Kiran said mockingly. How cute. But learning words does not make you one of us, human. You are still weak, still worthless. Taiho looked at him calmly. I have never claimed to be strong, my lord. I'm only a guest in your great empire. Kiran laughed. A guest? No, you are a prisoner dressed in fine clothes. Do not forget your place. Taiho said nothing. He simply bowed and stepped back. Vera watched the exchange closely. Most men would have shown anger at such insults. Most men would have tried to fight back with words or fists. But Taiho did neither. He stayed calm like deep water that could not be disturbed. That night, Vera called her advisor, an old Kelthon named Maron. He had served her family for 3 generations and was wise beyond measure. What do you think of the human? Vera asked. Maron stroked his long gray beard. He is interesting. He does not behave like other humans I have studied. How so? Most humans are emotional creatures. They react quickly to pain, to insults, to fear. But this one, he controls himself completely. It is almost unnatural. Vera nodded slowly. I noticed the same thing. He learned our language in 4 months. Our children take years to master it. Maron looked at her with serious eyes. Your Majesty, may I speak freely? Of course. I think we have underestimated humans. We won the war because we had better ships and better weapons. But perhaps Perhaps they are stronger than we believed. Vera laughed softly. Stronger? They are small and fragile. Their bodies break easily. Maran shook his head. The body is only one kind of strength. The mind is another. And the will. The will is the greatest strength of all. Vera thought about his words long after he left. Meanwhile, Taiho continued his quiet routine. He trained harder every day. He'd read more books. He learned about Kelphin politics, military tactics, and history. He memorized the names of every noble family, every important general, every major event of the past 1,000 years. He also watched and listened. He noticed which nobles were loyal to the queen and which ones whispered behind her back. He saw the cracks in the empire, the jealousy, the greed, the hunger for power. The servants still ignored him. The guards still treated him like nothing. But Taiho saw everything. One evening, a young servant girl named Lyra brought his dinner. She was small for a Kelphin, with kind eyes that did not match the coldness of her people. She placed the tray on his table and turned to leave. "Thank you," Taiho said in Kel, then Lyra stopped and looked at him in surprise. No one had ever thanked her before. "You are welcome," she said slowly. Taiho smiled gently. "What is your name?" "Lyra," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing my food every day, Lyra. I appreciate it." Lyra did not know what to say. She bowed quickly and hurried out of the room, her heart beating fast. This human was different. He was kind. From that day on, Lyra began to talk to Taiho. She told him about the palace, the gossip, the secrets. She became his only friend in the cold empire. And Taiho waited. He trained. He learned. He prepared. He did not know what the future would bring, but he knew that one day his patience would be rewarded. The storm was coming, and when it arrived, Taiho would be ready. 6 months had passed since Taiho arrived at the Kelphin Palace. Life continued in its quiet, cold way. The nobles still ignored him. The queen still treated him like a decoration. But things were about to change. It started with whispers. Lyra came to Taiho's room one evening with fear in her eyes. Her hands were shaking as she placed his dinner tray on the table. "Something is wrong," she said quietly. "The generals have been meeting all day. The queen looks worried." Taiho set down his book. "What happened?" "I do not know all the details," Lyra said. "But I heard them mention the Norak." Taiho's body went still. He had read about the Norak in his studies. They were a warrior race from the outer edges of the galaxy. They were bigger than the Kelphin, stronger and more brutal. Their empire had been growing for centuries, swallowing smaller civilizations like fire eating dry wood. "Are they attacking?" Taiho asked. Lyra nodded, her face pale. "They say the Norak fleet is coming. Thousands of ships. More than we can fight." That night, the palace exploded with activity. Generals ran through the halls, shouting orders. Soldiers prepared their weapons. Nobles packed their valuables and planned their escape. Fear spread through the empire like a disease. Queen Vera sat in her war room, surrounded by her advisors and military leaders. Maps covered the walls, showing the enemy's position. The numbers were terrifying. 10,000 warships, General Raken reported. His voice was hard, but his eyes showed worry. "They crossed the border 3 days ago. Our outer defenses have already fallen. How many ships do we have?" Vera asked. 4,000. Maybe less. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what those numbers meant. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Victory was almost impossible. "Can we call for help?" One advisor asked. "Perhaps the humans—" "No," Vera said sharply. "We will not beg the humans for help. We are the Kelphin Empire. We will fight our own battles." But deep inside, Vera felt a cold hand gripping her heart. She had never faced an enemy like this before. The Norak were monsters. They did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They only destroyed. 3 days later, the Norak fleet arrived in Kelthan space. The battle was short and brutal. The Kelthan ships fought bravely, but they were overwhelmed. One by one, the blue lights of their vessels disappeared from the screens, replaced by darkness. General Raken died on the front lines, his ship destroyed by enemy fire. Half of the royal fleet was gone within the first hour. The survivors retreated toward the homeworld, but the Norak followed them like hungry wolves chasing wounded prey. The next morning, the enemy reached the planet. Teho watched from his window as dark shapes filled the gray sky. Norak dropships fell like black rain, carrying thousands of soldiers toward the capital. Explosions shook the ground. Buildings crumbled. Screams filled the air. Lyra ran into his room, crying, "They are here. They are inside the city." Taiho grabbed her shoulders gently. "Listen to me. Stay calm. Where is the queen?" "In the throne room. The guards are protecting her, but—" Lyra could not finish. Her whole body was shaking. Ho looked out the window again. He saw Norak soldiers marching through the streets. They were massive creatures, even bigger than the Kelthan. Their skin was dark green, and their bodies were covered in thick armor. They carried weapons that burned everything they touched. People ran and screamed, but there was nowhere to hide. The Norak killed without mercy soldiers, nobles, servants, children. It did not matter. They destroyed everything. In the throne room, Queen Vera stood surrounded by her remaining guards. There were only 20 of them left. The rest had died defending the walls. Advisor Mon stood beside her, his old face filled with sorrow. "Your Majesty, you must escape," Marin said. "There is a secret tunnel beneath the palace. You can reach the mountains and hide." Vera shook her head. "I will not run. I am the queen. If my empire falls, I fall with it. But your Majesty—" "Enough, Marin. My decision is final." The doors of the throne room shook as something heavy hit them from outside. The guards raised their weapons, their faces grim but determined. They knew they would die today, but they would die protecting their queen. The doors burst open. Norak soldiers poured into the room like a flood of darkness. They were massive, terrifying, and unstoppable. The Kelthan guards charged forward with brave cries, but they were cut down within seconds. Their weapons could not pierce the Norak armor. Their strength was nothing compared to the enemy's brutal power. Maron tried to protect the queen, but a Norak soldier struck him aside like a toy. The old advisor crashed into the wall and did not move again. Within minutes, Vera stood alone. Her guards were dead. Her advisor was unconscious or worse. The Norak surrounded her, their dark eyes gleaming with cruel pleasure. The leader of the Norak stepped forward. He was the biggest of them all, a mountain of muscle and armor. His name was Vorduk, the Blood General. He had destroyed 100 worlds and killed 1 million enemies. To him, this was just another conquest. "The Queen of the Kelthan," Vorduk said, his voice deep and rough. "I expected more of a fight." Vera raised her chin, refusing to show fear. "You will gain nothing from this. My people will rise again." Vorduk laughed, a horrible sound that echoed through the room. "Your people are dead. Your fleet is ash. Your empire is finished." He stepped closer, his massive hand reaching toward her. "And you will be my trophy." Vera closed her eyes. This was the end. She had failed her people, her ancestors, her entire civilization. Everything she had worked for was gone. But then, something unexpected happened. A sound came from the back of the room. Footsteps. Calm, steady footsteps. Vorduk turned, annoyed. "Who dares?" He stopped. Standing in the doorway was a small figure. A human. His black hair was messy, and his clothes were simple. His face was calm, almost peaceful. He looked completely ordinary. It was Taiho. He walked into the room slowly, stepping over the bodies of the fallen guards. His eyes moved across the Norak soldiers, counting them. 12. No, 15. All armed, all armored, all ready to kill. Vortic stared at him in confusion. A human? Here? He laughed again. This is too easy. Kill him. 2 Norak soldiers charged at Taiho with their weapons raised. Taiho did not run. He did not scream. He did not even blink. He just moved. What happened next would change everything. Vera watched with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was seeing. The small, quiet human who had lived in her palace for 6 months, the one everyone had called weak and worthless, was about to show the true power of humanity. The storm had arrived, and his name was Taiho. The first Norak soldier swung his weapon at Taiho's head. It was a heavy blade that had cut through Kelthan armor like paper. One hit would split a normal person in 2, but Taiho was not normal. He ducked under the blade, moving faster than anyone expected. His body was a blur. Before the soldier could swing again, Taiho's fist crashed into the gap between the Norak's helmet and chest plate. The punch was so powerful that the soldier flew backward, his neck broken. The second soldier tried to grab him. Taiho spun around, caught the soldier's arm, and twisted it with terrible force. The sound of breaking bones echoed through the throne room. The soldier screamed and fell, but Taiho was already moving to the next target. Queen Vera watched with her mouth open. She could not believe her eyes. The human, the weak, small, quiet human, was destroying Norak soldiers with his bare hands. Vortic stared in shock. What? What is this? 3 more soldiers attacked at once. They were careful now, surrounding Taiho from all sides. But it did not matter. Taiho moved like water, flowing between them. He struck one in the throat, crushed another's knee with a kick, and used the third's own weapon to pierce through his armor. Bodies fell around him like leaves in autumn. The Norak were bigger, stronger, and better armed. But Taiho was faster. He was smarter. And most importantly, he never stopped moving. His attacks were quick and brutal. He aimed for weak points, joints, necks, eyes. Every punch, every kick, every strike was meant to kill. Kill him! Vortic shouted. All of you, attack! The remaining soldiers charged forward together. 8 of them against 1 human. The odds seemed impossible. But Taiho had faced worse. He grabbed a fallen sword from the ground and met them head on. The blade danced in his hands, cutting through armor and flesh. Blood sprayed across the marble floor. Norak soldiers fell one after another, unable to match his speed or skill. Vira's advisor, Maran, woke up slowly. His head was bleeding, and his body ached. But when he saw what was happening, he forgot all his pain. The human was fighting. No, not fighting, he was winning. Impossible, Maran whispered. One by one, the Norak soldiers died. Taiho's body was covered in cuts and bruises. Blood dripped from his face. But he never stopped. His eyes were cold and focused, like a predator hunting its prey. Finally, only Vortic remained. The blood general stood frozen, unable to understand what had happened. His best warrior soldiers who had conquered entire planets were dead, killed by a single human. What are you? Vortic growled. His voice was shaking with something new. Fear. Taiho breathed heavily. His muscles burned, and his lungs screamed for air. But he stood straight, facing the massive Norak without backing down. I am Taiho, he said simply. A human. Vortic roared and charged. He was the greatest warrior of the Norak Empire. He had never lost a fight. He would not lose to some tiny creature from a weak planet. His fist came down like a hammer, powerful enough to crush stone. Taiho dodged to the side, but Vordak was faster than his soldiers. His second punch grazed Taiho's shoulder, sending him spinning across the floor. Taiho crashed against a pillar, pain exploding through his body. Vordak laughed and stomped toward him. "You are strong for a human," Vordak admitted. "But strength is not enough. I am the Blood General. I have killed thousands. You are nothing compared to me." Taiho pushed himself up, spitting blood onto the floor. His vision was blurry. Every bone in his body screamed at him to stop, to give up, to rest. But he thought about Earth. He thought about Admiral Park and his mother. He thought about all the people who were counting on peace. If he died here, the war would start again. Millions would suffer. No, he could not die. Not yet. He stood up on shaking legs and raised his fists. Vordak frowned. "You still want to fight? You can barely stand." Taiho smiled, though it hurt. "Humans are stubborn. Did no one tell you?" Vordak attacked again, throwing punch after punch. Taiho could not dodge them all. He took hits to his ribs, his arms, his face. Each blow felt like being struck by a meteor. But he kept moving. He kept fighting, and he waited for his chance. Vordak threw a massive uppercut, putting all his strength into the attack. It was meant to end the fight. But Taiho had been waiting for exactly this moment. He twisted his body, letting the fist pass inches from his face. Then he struck. His fist drove into Vordak's eye. The Blood General screamed. It was a horrible sound, filled with pain and rage. He stumbled backward, covering his face with his hands. Green blood poured between his fingers. Taiho did not stop. He grabbed the broken spear from the ground and charged. With all his remaining strength, he drove the weapon through the gap in Vordak's armor, right into his heart. Vordak's eyes went wide. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His massive body swayed once, twice, then crashed to the floor like a falling mountain. The throne room fell silent. Taiho stood over the body of the Blood General, breathing hard. His whole body was shaking. Blood covered his hands, his face, his clothes. He looked like a demon from an old story. Vera stared at him, unable to move. The man who had lived quietly in her palace, the man everyone had mocked and ignored, had just killed the most feared warrior in the galaxy. "How?" she whispered. "How is this possible?" Taiho turned to look at her. His eyes were tired but still burning with determination. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice rough. "Are you hurt?" Vera shook her head slowly. She could not find words. Taiho nodded and walked toward the window. Outside, the battle was still raging. Norak soldiers were everywhere, destroying the city. But their leader was dead. Their best warriors were gone. "The enemy has no command now," Taiho said quietly. "If your remaining forces attack, they can push them back." Marin limped over to stand beside Vera. "He's right, Your Majesty. Without Vordak, the Norak will be confused. This is our chance." Vera finally found her voice. "Send the order. All forces attack." Within the hour, the tide of battle changed. The Norak, who had seemed unstoppable, began to fall apart. Without their Blood General, they fought without strategy. The Kelfin defenders pushed them back street by street. Building by building. By morning, the enemy was retreating. The invasion was over. In the throne room, Taiho sat against a pillar, too tired to move. His wounds were being treated by servants who looked at him with new eyes. They had called him weak. They had laughed at him. Now they served him with trembling hands. Vera approached him slowly. She looked at this human, this small, ordinary-looking man who had saved her life and her empire. "You could have let me die," she said quietly. "You could have escaped. Why did you save me?" Taiho looked up at her. Even covered in blood and barely able to breathe, his eyes were calm. Because peace is not just a word, he said. It is a promise. And I keep my promises. Vera felt something change inside her heart. Something she had never felt before. Respect. 3 days after the battle, the Norak fleet was gone. They had fled back to their own territory, broken and defeated. The Kelthan Empire had survived, though the cost was great. Half the capital lay in ruins. Thousands of soldiers and civilians had died. The scars of the invasion would take generations to heal. But they were alive. And they owed it all to one man. Taiho spent those 3 days in the medical wing, floating between sleep and waking. The doctors worked on him around the clock, healing his wounds with advanced technology. They were amazed that he was still breathing at all. His body had suffered damage that would have killed any Kelthan 3 times over. But somehow, his heart kept beating. His lungs kept breathing. His stubborn human body refused to give up. When Taiho finally opened his eyes, Queen Vera was sitting beside his bed. She had been there for hours, watching him sleep. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something different now. Something warm. "You are awake," she said softly. Taiho blinked, adjusting to the light. "How long was I out?" 3 days. The doctors said you should have died. Your injuries were severe." Taiho smiled weakly. "Humans are harder to kill than you think." Vera nodded slowly. She had learned that lesson well. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the damaged city. Workers were already cleaning the streets, rebuilding what was destroyed. Life was returning to normal, step by step. "All my life, I was taught that humans were weak," Vera said, her voice quiet. "Our teachers told us your species was soft and emotional. Easy to break. Easy to control." She turned to look at him. "I believed those lies." Taiho said nothing. He just listened. "When you came to my palace, I saw you as a prize. A symbol of our victory. I thought you were nothing more than a decoration." She paused, her eyes heavy with shame. "I was wrong." "About everything?" Taiho sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "Your Majesty, you did not know. How could you? Our 2 peoples have been enemies for 10 years. Fear and hatred did not leave room for understanding." Vera shook her head. "That is no excuse. I watched my nobles mock you. I heard the servants laugh at you. And I did nothing to stop it. I even enjoyed it sometimes." Her voice cracked slightly. "You saved my life, Taiho. You saved my entire empire. And I treated you like an animal." She bowed her head. It was the first time she had ever bowed to anyone. "I am sorry," she said. The room fell silent. Outside, birds sang in the gray morning sky. The world kept spinning, unaware of the moment happening inside that small room. Taiho looked at the queen, this proud, powerful woman who had ruled an empire, and saw something new in her. Not arrogance, not coldness, just honesty. "I accept your apology," he said simply. Vera raised her head, surprised. "Just like that? After everything I did?" Taiho smiled. "Holding anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. My grandmother taught me that. Besides," he looked out the window at the healing city. "There is too much work to do. We cannot afford to waste time on old wounds." Over the following weeks, everything changed. Vera called a great meeting of all the noble families. The throne room was packed with lords and ladies, generals and advisors. They expected the queen to announce new military plans or discuss the rebuilding effort. But Vera had something else in mind. She stepped forward and addressed her people with a clear, strong voice. "I have learned a valuable lesson," she said. "For generations, we believed that the Kelthan were the strongest beings in the galaxy. We looked down on other species, calling them weak and inferior. But we were blind." The nobles shifted uncomfortably. This was not what they expected. When the Norak invaded, our armies fell. Our ships burned. Our great warriors died in the streets. Vera paused, letting the words sink in. And who saved us? Not a Kelphin general. Not a noble lord. A human. One human, whom we all dismissed as worthless. She pointed at Taiho, who stood at the edge of the room. All eyes turned to him. This man killed the Blood General with his bare hands. He fought 15 Norak soldiers alone and won. He did what none of us could do. Vera's voice rose with passion. And he did it not for glory, not for reward, but because he believed in peace. Because he made a promise. The nobles were silent. Many of them looked at Taiho with new eyes, seeing him for the first time. From this day forward, Vera declared, the Kelphin Empire will treat humans as equals. We will not mock them. We will not look down on them. We will remember that strength comes in many forms, and the greatest strength is the will to endure. She turned to Taiho and extended her hand. My husband, my partner, will you stand beside me as we rebuild our world? Taiho walked forward slowly. The room watched in breathless silence. When he reached the queen, he took her hand. I will, he said. The months that followed were filled with change. Taiho worked alongside Vira, helping to rebuild the damaged cities and reform the old systems. His knowledge of human culture and his wisdom earned him respect among the nobles. Even Lord Kiran, who had once mocked him, admitted that the human was worthy. Lyra, the young servant who had been Taiho's only friend, was promoted to a high position in the palace. She cried when Vera announced it, unable to believe her fortune. You deserve this, Taiho told her. You showed kindness when no one else did. That is true strength. As for Taiho and Vera, their relationship grew slowly but surely. What had begun as a cold political marriage became something real. They talked for hours every night, sharing stories about their peoples and their dreams. They disagreed sometimes, argued loudly, and made up quietly. But beneath it all, there was respect. There was trust. There was love. One evening, they sat together on the palace balcony, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. I used to wonder why you came here, Vera said softly. Why you agreed to marry a stranger in a hostile empire. Taiho was quiet for a moment. I was tired of war. I had seen too much death, too much suffering. I wanted to believe that peace was possible. And now? Do you still believe? He looked at her, his eyes warm in the starlight. I do, because of you. Because of this. Vera leaned her head on his shoulder. For the first time in her life, she felt truly happy. Across the galaxy, word spread about the human who had defeated the Blood General. The Norak Empire, once so confident in their power, grew quiet. Other civilizations began to look at humanity differently. They were not weak. They were not soft. They were survivors. They were fighters, and they kept their promises. Years later, Taiho would become known as the Bridge, the man who connected two worlds, who turned enemies into allies, who showed the universe what a single human could accomplish. But on that quiet evening, he was just a man sitting beside his wife, watching the stars shine over a healing world. The war was over. And peace, at last, had won.